Today on the show, I am welcoming to my new studio Mr. Mark Hocking, who has been extremely patient as I've spent the last 45 minutes trying to figure out how to make everything go and find the bits to make the things go. Mark, it is so wonderful to have you joining me here today.
Thanks, Scott. Good to be here.
Now, Mark, I was asking how best to introduce you, and it all comes into play when we look at the shirt, the MHSV, Mark Hocking Special Vehicles, because you specialise in really sourcing, procuring, selling very, very special cars.
Yeah. JDM and Euro, basically, as we had discussed earlier, American vehicles not really of interest to me, but there are some older US stuff that's special, but yeah, basically Euro, JDM, and obviously more Japanese because I lived there for so long and started my early days at Mitsubishi. So I've just been going automotive all the way through from after leaving school, and so yeah, JDM is obviously my specialty.
That's your place, and that was probably how I got to know you. Was I saw the things that you did and the types of cars that you imported, and these are childhood dreams. These are in our video games that we played when we were playing, the very first PlayStation, and we're there going, "Oh, GDR, it's Godzilla," and these are wonderful things. And then I saw you bringing in these wonderful things, and I'm like, Mark, tell me more.
Yeah, I started initially learn Japanese was the key. So went to Japan, but I saw this huge industry, saw gorgeous cars everywhere, and once I spoke the language quite well after a few years, then I just sort of and I taught English initially, but then I just that was a means to an end. It was okay for a while, but my passion is cars, and I just saw this niche, finding high-end, special, high-performance JDM and sending them to initially Australia, but I ended up selling them to half a dozen countries, starting 25 years ago.
And for people that may not have, come across you and what you do and the sorts of things, share with me probably some of your favourite cars that you've been able to import. Is there a top car or top five?
It's a tricky one because there are so many beautiful cars that have been made starting in the 90s, early 2000. Obviously the NSX I enjoyed. I had an NSX for a couple of years. I had a 32 GTR for about 7 or 8 years. I've had probably my favourite would be the 32 GTR. It was one owner, low mileage, and black, no accident history, just a gorgeous thing, grade 4.5 car, and I had that for about 7 or 8 years. And then a guy in Malaysia wouldn't leave me alone, and I ended up exporting it to Malaysia. That was a mistake. I should have kept it.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you still miss that car?
I actually do.
I'm just going to move that one for you a little bit like that, just help you with your microphone there. But yeah,
Thank
I bet
you
do, because the 32 GTR, I mean, that's the original Godzilla.
That's where it all started. Putting this on the map, really.
Oh, mate, it did. I mean, and when you drive them, the first time I drove a GTR, because I didn't understand, I understood the hype, and I sort of thought, car's a car, I'm sure it's good. But then I drove one, and I went, wow, no, I totally get it. These are on another level.
Yeah, when I started in Japan teaching and studying, I had students who were into JDM, and I had a nurse she was a student, and she worked at a hospital, and one of the doctors there had a heavily modified 32 GTR, and he was kind enough to lend this sort of 600 horsepower, fairly heavily modified 32 GTR to Yumiko, and she said, "Hey Mark, guess what? We've got a GTR for the day," and incredible trust. The doctor would lend a 25-year-old nurse a car like that for the day, and we had a lot of fun. And that was probably the start of it all, really.
See, that's pretty wild. I can't believe that they'd let you borrow. Particularly
I couldn't believe it.
Horsepower. What year is that?
So that was 94.
Oh, wow.
95.
Oh, my God. So when it was like a properly new car as well.
They hadn't been out for long. And
it was pumping 600 horsepower.
Huge top-mount turbo, and I think even forged internals were there as well.
Far out, because for 94, like that's a belter of a car as well. When you think back here in Australia, that would have been top of the tree for that kind of power. You wouldn't have even seen things like that.
No, it's and the Japanese did the love. They still do have a huge passion for high performance, high horsepower cars. But generally, I've stayed with the unmodified, the clean, original, straight, no accident history. I've stayed with special vehicles, hence the name. I do get orders for ex-track cars and race cars, but the bulk would be really clean, non-accident vehicles.
Well, that's what you want if you're a collector or an enthusiast.
As a collector, yeah.
That's always... The unicorn car is the one owner, low kilometre, original.
Yeah.
That's the one we're all looking for, the barn find as such, but also with perfect mechanical history.
Yeah, you do find casual barn finds in Japan, but a lot of the stuff comes through the dealerships and through the auctions, and it's amazing. 125, 126 million people. There's just a constant supply of really special vehicles, although that is changing.
Is it? You're seeing that starting to change?
Yeah, these cars were made in the 90s.
And that's the problem. All our heroes were made in the 90s, and then, the 2000s was a bit of a sadder time for Japanese cars. There were a handful, but nothing quite like the magic of the 90s.
But that's when it started. That was the heyday, most believe, but special cars were still produced in the early to mid, Tommy Mackin Evolutions, 2000. The 34 GTRs were later again, and they continued producing NSX in its early form till
06.
I think 06.
Was it 04 for 34s or thereabouts? So I'm trying to remember, and then S15 was somewhere near the end of its run, but all the greatest, all of Japan's greatest hits.
The really special cars were few and far between after that time. But I remember I was in Japan at the time. I think I was the first Australian to buy a brand new 35 GTR. I lived 500 metres from a Nissan dealership, and I remember all the hype and the media coverage. It was quite phenomenal. And I walked down to this Nissan dealership, and I put in an order, paid a deposit, and that was pretty exciting stuff when that car, brand new 35 GTR, arrived.
Because I must say that was probably the start of the next renaissance, wasn't it? But again, it's been a slow burn. But that 35 GTR came out almost of nowhere, because what was that? That was 789 or thereabouts. So
Nissan went undercover, and they went below ground, and they kept it very quiet, and that was like 6 or 7 years in the making. And so it was it was a huge deviation and sort of level up, I suppose, from previous GTRs. And they went away from Skyline, so just the Nissan GTR. And Nissan in Australia was sitting on the fence, and they hadn't committed to selling them at that stage. So I had a half dozen customers who all wanted, so I bought 5 in total, 1 for myself, 4 for other clients, because they wanted to try to bring them in under the low volume scheme. And it was a really exciting time. I remember driving it home from the showroom, and it was like nothing I'd ever driven. You could hear noises, very mechanical, noises that you didn't expect to hear. It was like you're driving an absolute, basically a race car, and it was ready for track use, and it was phenomenal fun.
They are a real monster. And you even see what they're changing hands for now, all the ones that are coming in now, and, $70,000+ for an 07, 08, 09 decent GTR.
Yeah, you can. It's a lot of car for the money, because brand new they were a lot more than that. So, that's why we're seeing them coming in significant numbers, because they're a phenomenal car for 70 or 80K. It's a lot of car. I remember ordering a brand new 34 GTR, an N1. I had a client in Tasmania who wanted to race an N1, so I went into Nissan, and I think it was 5.7 million yen, and ordered the last of the 34. It was towards the end of production of the 34 GTR, and ordered an N1. That would be worth phenomenal money now, but bought it. 5 weeks later, it arrived, and with the carbon bonnet and no radio, and I can't even remember if it had an air conditioner. I think we ordered specifically for track use, and he then raced that in Tasmania in the Targa Tasman, amongst other races. What
a magical car.
Yeah, it was. 5.7 million yen is...
Because what are you looking at there? I mean, today's money, that's like just under 60 grand, or give or take.
60K.
Yeah,
so
give or take.
I had 10K to 10, 15K to land it.
I mean, that's comedy money when you're like supercar, absolute top. I mean, you're in GT3 specifics.
Incredibly rare too. Very unique, very low production numbers. You had to special order, and I wish I'd ordered one for myself at the same time.
Mate, you'd wish you had 10 of them.
Yeah, you would.
Better than buying Bitcoin. They're wonderful cars, and I guess I'm really happy to have you come and chat to me today, because what I guess I'm looking for here is I would like to know the origin story of Mr. Mark Hocking, because you don't just go and buy N1 GTRs out of the gates. There is a process to having found yourself living in Japan and all these wonderful things that you've done. Mate, where are you born? Where do you hail from?
Brisbane, actually. Brisbane, then UK for a few years. Dad specialised and worked in the UK, so had 5 years in the UK.
Just after you were born?
Yeah, so I was 3 when we went there.
Wow.
And then 2 or 3, and then through to about 5 or 6, I was living in Yorkshire. So I came home from UK with a very broad Yorkshire accent.
That would have been good in primary school?
With my cousins, and people used to laugh. They just wanted to hear me talk.
Oh, they would.
I'd say, Mum and Dad, will you come on the bus with me, and things like that. And my cousins thought it was hysterical.
Oh, they would have thought that was the greatest.
And then South Australia, then basically Adelaide for the next, until I was sort of late 20s, and then Japan. And then 15 years in Japan.
Far out. Now, I'm going to get you to slow down there before we get right into the crazy things. So, sorry. So you've moved to the UK. So what was your father involved in? What was the business that he did?
He was a medico and specialised in obstetrics and gynaecology, and just wanted to further his studies there. And so we were there for 5 years while he worked and studied. And
so up to 8 years of age you were there. So you'd have some memories of that time?
Yeah, good memories. I mean, it's a cold place, Yorkshire, with lots of memories. But the best memories sort of, I think, started when I got back to South Australia after that. Because I think I was probably 6 or 7 when we left there, so definitely have memories. but it was very much a family time. We didn't. Mum, we lived on the hospital, or in the hospital grounds, in accommodation at the hospital, and so no extensive network of friends or cousins. So it was. We spent a lot of family time together, and it was an important time for Dad to further his, his specialty, and to get the necessary experience to get a special job back in Australia, which was the plan. And but yeah, the fun for me, obviously, from returning from the UK, then being able to establish myself in a school and make
your friends here.
Make your friends.
Because would you have been, was there some primary school and those sorts of things in York? Or how did it, was it at the hospital? Was it all like an army-based type thing?
Local schools.
Yeah.
But
I'm trying to imagine little Mark Hocking down at the pub.
Not particularly good schools. The standard, I was just put into the closest school, and I remember the school. I remember having, but I was young, and it wasn't an important time as far as schooling goes.
But it's just interesting, mate. Again, these are things that I had no idea about you. Even I would have known you for over a decade now, and I had no idea that at some point in time you also were there. So you've come home and then back to South Australia, and is there sort of a network of family?
Yeah, family and cousins and friends, old friends. Mum was much happier when she came back to Australia. It was a solitary, tough time for her in a lot of ways. So that's why we were just there for Dad to study and come back.
And then get back home. Because that would have been tough for her because, again, gynecology, obstetrics, that's a big job.
He worked hard, studied long hours. He actually sometimes wouldn't come home for a few days. So I remember Mum telling us at one stage Dad would come home finally, and I'd be hiding behind Mum. Who is this guy? Who is this strange man, Mum? And so he was just very busy, and so it was good to come back.
And have that broader network, because that would have been a lot of stress on your mum to just sort of keep that all going while he was there, and having to move your family and raise the kids, because brothers and sisters.
I had a younger brother, so
there's two of you.
It was a busy time for Mum.
And were you two a bit wild, or were you?
I think we were very normal kids that played, and I remember losing my front teeth in the little playground opposite where we was living in the hospital. It was one of those swings that I'm sure they don't have them anymore for this very reason, but I got a bit too close and the swing came back, and
smashed you.
Out goes the front two teeth.
That is the right game. My little fella did face first into the concrete as a little bloke, and tooth out. So these are the games we play.
A lot of kids have done it, I'm sure.
Actually, now that I think of it, I got a tennis racket to the face. So one of my front teeth is actually half fake.
Oh, right.
Would you believe? Again, and that wasn't even being silly. That was just kids playing tennis.
The old accident.
Yeah, mate, the old running into it. So you've come. All right. So you're in South Australia, and obviously that sounds like that was quite a special time, the way that you're speaking about it, because you haven't had that experience as a young person, and then all of a sudden there's all these people.
Oh, look, I started swimming. Mum was really keen to get me into swimming for obvious reasons. It's good to be able to swim.
Mate, you have to. If you're an Australian kid,
you have to be able to swim.
You bloody swim.
The kids, people who can't swim, it can be...
It's a real problem.
Can be, just way too many drownings in Australia. So the first thing Mum did was got us swimming lessons with a Mr. Walker, and I swam. He was pretty full on. So as a 7-year-old, when we got back, I started swimming virtually immediately and swam a lot, and I became quite efficient at swimming, quite good at it, in fact, because I did so much of it. And I remember joining the Boy Scouts, and we had a swimming carnival, and I'd been doing so much swimming from such a young age that by the time the other boys had touched the other end, I had already returned and I was getting out of the pool. So that's something I already.
That's a good feeling.
And it's helped me in numerous occasions, and I've saved a few people.
Oh shit! Really?
From potentially drowning. So that was a good thing to do. And you could never do that kind of stuff in the UK. So yeah, all the really good memories sort of started.
And the outdoor stuff, because I know that you're sort of talking about swimming and scouts and like just being out and doing things with people, rather than, I guess, those fairly early, fairly formative years were very much an insular time.
Definitely, that sums it up well. We had cousins on farms, so I mean that's probably another significant factor. I used to spend school holidays on farms. I learned to drive a car when I was about 10. I started riding motorbikes when I was about 8, driving tractors at 11. So, it's just probably
straight into the mechanical
the motor vehicle, the whole driving cars. It started really a long time ago.
And you were drawn to it, or you're encouraged to try?
Oh, I loved it. It was I was given the opportunity, and I just jumped at it. I learned to ride in a little Yamaha 80cc Yamaha YD. I can't think of the actual model, but it's was the perfect size for an 8-year-old, and my uncle couldn't get me off it.
Absolutely, mate. Those little peewee bikes, you get the kids on them, and then and the mums are there with their going, "Oh God, what have you done?" And the dads are there going, "Yeah, send it, mate."
The farm's the perfect place to.
Farm is the perfect place for those shenanigans, because you can head over to the back paddocks where nobody can see.
Well, we used them to move sheep around, and it wasn't all fun. My uncle
had to do some work. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, the shearing.
Oh wow,
rousing up, just moving the sheeps in the pens, and I used to love it.
Yeah, but that's the joy of the farm life too, isn't it? Like, there's no free lunch there. If you're going to hang around, put yourself, get to work. Another body's always helpful.
Absolutely. Farms. My uncle was no exception. He worked from dawn till dusk, and great memories with cousins on farms. So yeah, that's where it all sort of.
And getting in the tractors as well, mate.
Reapers I used to drive. They were cereal as well as animal. They had sheep, cattle, more sheep, but they're also wheat farmers. So I'd drive these big reapers with 10-metre wide combs, and they would just, my cousins would leave me, all morning just to reap these big paddocks, and I just thought all my Christmases had come at once.
Yeah, you're like, I can't believe these idiots are letting me drive. And they're going, we can't believe this idiot thinks this is a good time. Everybody wins.
Well, when you remember one cousin, he had a brand new Hilux ute, and he'd send me into the paddocks to pick up rocks, because you had to clear the paddocks from rocks before you could. Otherwise, you just damage equipment. So I put this in low range first gear with this little hand throttle. I'd have the Hilux just crawling along at about 2 kilometres per hour, and I'd be walking alongside it all by myself, and I'd be picking up these big rocks and throwing them onto the back of the ute. And, when you're 20 years old and you're in your prime, it's amazing what you can do. If I think back.
Superhuman strength.
When you're in that period, you could never do it now, but...
that's because you're too aware of the risks.
Yeah, but also you have a lot more strength as a 20-year-old. You've got a lot more strength than you do as a 50 or a 60-year-old. I've been around cars and bikes all my life, and just the move to Japan just made so much.
Well, it would have, but see, you're accelerating ahead again, mate. I'm imagining farm boy here. Was there a draw to the to the land? Was there how was school for you in South Australia?
Look, school, I had a pretty it was a good run in terms of just health, sport, school life. It was all pretty look, I went to a good school. In early schooling was not so great, but from grade 5 onwards, as an 8 or 9-year-old, I suppose, from grade 5 primary school through, I was lucky enough to go to a good school, and sport was more of my, I loved sport, and I generally played sport, quite well. And then towards the end of high school, put my head down and did study, but studying French and biology and physics, it wasn't really what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Didn't speak to you.
Didn't really speak to me. So it wasn't until after school that I did university degrees and a business degree, and did mechanical engineering, and I really wanted to do that. I was passionate about it, and I did well at it. Makes a massive difference if you want to.
Oh, huge difference.
If it talks to you, as you say.
What sports? Were you a cricket man, a rugby man, or just the swimming?
I was, swimming, tennis, and AFL, swimming, tennis, and football. Dad loved tennis, so from about the age of 8 or 9, he had me cutting the tennis court with an electric mower of all things. Pretty dangerous thing, really, with that long extension cord.
Sounds terrible.
But he didn't. Perhaps IHS wasn't really a big thing back then. It's amazing the things that I did as a kid that you would never let your kid do now.
No, you think back and you're like, whoa! But it was just accepted. There was just so much stuff. You didn't have to wear seatbelts, and people were still. Yeah, there were all sorts of funny things that we sort of go now and go, oh.
Well, I used to take a train to school, and before we moved closer to the school, and the red hen was the red hen, and you used to be able to open the doors as the train is moving. So from basically the Salisbury Plains, not a lot of it's fully developed now, and there's houses everywhere, but back then we used to fly along at about 70, 80 kilometres an hour on these trains with the door open and the fresh air and just looking out onto fields, and it was not a problem. But imagine doing that these days.
Oh, mate, I remember going down a highway sitting in the back of the ute with 5 or 6 other blokes.
Oh, really?
100k an hour just in the back of the ute. And you didn't think too hard about it, because if they went, yeah, righto, jump in, righto, just went for it. Like nobody, I just don't recall going, wow, that seems really dangerous, because it didn't seem very dangerous.
No, at the time it didn't.
No, like the train doors open at 80k an hour, you're like, no, it's very pleasant.
It was. We used to love doing it, but you wouldn't be allowed to do it anymore.
Absolutely not. So when you left school, you obviously, pushed into your studies a little bit more and tried. When you left, did you have a plan of what you might do? Did you have an inkling, or did you just...
Yeah, look, engineering, my godfather was the managing director of Mitsubishi Australia at the time, and when I was doing year 12, I was thinking about different options, and he said, if you think engineering would be a good option for you, and I was definitely mechanically inclined, and so that's where I started. I did a fitter and machinist trade, and while studying an associate diploma in mechanical engineering at the University of South Australia, and so it was a really busy time.
I was going to say, Mark, you certainly don't come from a family of underachievers. There's... Dad
was a hard worker.
Absolutely, and then head of Mitsubishi as well, and you...
Yeah, his best friend, my godfather, Ian Webber, was the head of Mitsubishi.
That's no small role either.
So he was a good role model. And
so you were growing up around, some real go-getters.
Yeah, that sums it up, some real go-getters. And so I was doing trade school. I was working every day, about 4 days. I got to get a day off to do university studies. And I'd be, I had a little Alfa Romeo 2-litre 1973 105 2 litre. That was one of my first cars. So I started with a cool car.
You're speaking my language there. But you've also got to help me with something. A fitter and turner, you've got to go and explain like I'm five. I know the words.
Well, you make things.
What do you actually do?
You make things. You learn to use lathes and drills and milling machines to manufacture things out of steel.
Well, shit, that's what I want to do like now. So I've got to go and be a fitter and turner. That's what...
Yeah, fitter and machinist.
Fitter and machinist. Wow.
Initially, the term was fitter and turner, but then it changed to fitter and machinist. And because as a fitter and machinist, you would support and work on projects to keep to keep the manufacturing side of Mitsubishi going, and we'd be involved with making these large dies, which would go into the stamping and hardware department, which would punch out the actual doors and bonnets.
That's amazing. Oh, so back when we actually made the vehicles here in South Australia, so you worked at that plant,
Tonsley Park,
doing your trade apprentice.
Correct.
Bloody hell!
4-year apprenticeship, and then became a tradesman. And
holy shit, Mark! I'm really learning things today.
It was a great time. I mean, I loved it.
And what a skill set! But also not just the skill set, the methodology of thinking.
It's a great way to start. It was a good way to start out. Everyone's got to do an apprenticeship, and I think that was a good apprenticeship to do. When I say everyone's got to, any job, it's not glamorous when you start after school. So this just made sense, and then
to find yourself in a car facility as well, that sort of obviously would scratch an itch for you, having enjoyed these things.
Well, the benefits of working at Mitsubishi meant that when they produced the brand new Cordia Turbo, I was able to. I didn't buy the AA; I bought the AB, the next model, and I was I think once again I was the first person in South Australia to because I was able to order it early and
absolutely,
and I got it before the dealers, Mitsubishi dealers.
First
got
off
one.
the rank, just drive it out the back of the factory.
So I was driving around this burgundy red AB Cordia Turbo.
Mate, you would have been the coolest guy in South Australia.
Well, until I almost I drove up the freeway, and they've got different length torque shafts, so you've got to be. There was a bit of a brute when they full boost comes on. They tend to want to pull, so you have to. It's just a trap for young players. But fortunately, I was aware of it, and I had one close call, and that was all I needed. After that, I was
never again.
Learnt my lesson. Never again.
Terrifying.
And then I bought a brand new. Had a nice second-hand Starion, Mitsubishi Starion. So
really,
there were a lot of fine products. To come out of Mitsubishi,
wow.
And I was there in the coalface, so to speak.
You were there, yeah. So, and you were creating the parts that they used to actually press, and because that's a whole other understanding. Because when I look at cars, and you go, okay, so each of these pieces has been designed to fit together. I mean, I find it really extraordinary as I work on cars and go, somebody has sat here, figured this out, pulled it apart, stuck it together, and then figured out how to make this on a production line. I find that just endlessly fascinating.
Well, it was a great experience because you get a chance to move. They would move the apprentices towards the last year of your apprenticeship. You would spend 3 months in all the different departments. So I had 3 months in stamping and hardware, where they had these huge dies. That would you set up a die top and bottom and male and female, and then the sheet metals is fed through and the die comes down and stamps out the actual panel, and it was quite a dangerous job, really, if you think about it. You'd have to and occasionally you hear of stories where people got injured. Occasionally killed. So you had to really
have your arm in when you push the red button.
Well, they've got these special safety cages that will come down, so you can't actually do that. But in the preparation phase, tradespeople would get in there to make adjustments, and you have to have special blocks in there to stop it coming
Yeah,
down.
to
and
make sure it doesn't.
there was a lot of potential.
Oh, for things to
risks
go horribly wrong with big machines.
Yeah, I saw a few nasty accidents, but for me, when I did the trade and I graduated with my diploma in mechanical engineering at the same time, and got the opportunity to work in the noise, vibration, harshness department,
wow.
NVH, that was for me was way more exciting, and yeah, I love that. Excelled there.
So the applied science really
Basically,
was for you.
Yeah, using my engineering background, and when these cars are produced, they have to comply with Australian design rules, and exhaust, vibration, harshness, all has to be at the right levels and looked at carefully before a car can go into full production. So there was a lot of test driving, measuring of. I used sound pressure level equipment on a daily basis to check to make sure the cars were met with the requirements, and that often meant modifying exhaust systems. It meant changing aerodynamics of rear spoilers. It was a fascinating job.
That's incredible, Mark.
Using really cool equipment. And
because we talked heavily about the trade side there, but we didn't really go into the actual degree side. So within your mechanical engineering, and again, explain like I'm 5, talk me through like a mechanical engineering degree and what you need to do to gain those skills.
Look, engineering is mechanical. It's loads, it's forces, it's designing of trusses, making sure a metal beam can withstand certain loads, and that's all sort of to do with the mechanical engineering side, and you can and I really enjoyed that. But just because you graduate within a mechanical engineering qualification doesn't mean you're necessarily going to end up in that mechanical engineering type role. It means you can pick and choose from various similar type roles, and the NVH department of Mitsubishi was where I moved to.
And what was MVH? Sorry, what did that stand for?
Noise, vibration, harshness.
Noise, vibration, harshness. Right.
It's a specific department
which I never would have thought of
at Mitsubishi, and as I said, all the vehicles have to be compliant with. From a noise, vibration, harshness perspective. And, that was a fascinating job. Did that for a few years. But then I just was really driven at that stage, and I wanted to do further studies. So I did a business degree. I could just see with a technical background and with a business background, that would open doors. That was the plan. So...
Because did you have an idea of where... Because, I mean, you were working within the automotive sphere. Did you maybe think that you would go and work with major manufacturers, or was there a plan?
I worked for several other companies after Mitsubishi, but to do a business degree, I basically had to stop working. So I had about a 10-year period, a great time with Mitsubishi, but then I decided I don't want to study... work and study part-time and draw it out over quite a few years.
Just get it done.
Just get it done, 3-year degree, and just get it done. So so that's what I did.
And apply some context for me here. What year would that have been, if you can...
That would have been late 80s, early 90s.
Late 80s, early 90s, doing your business degree. Yeah, okay. So right at the back of, Wall Street, 89 crash. I'm just trying to put together, the what it was like to be a person in business.
Well, I got a job because of my Mitsubishi background. I got a job with Young and Rubicam Advertising, who had the Mitsubishi account. So I worked in as an account executive on the Mitsubishi account, which all it kind of fell into place. And
what are the odds?
did that for a couple of years. So
That's wild.
big, long, and that was a bit of a wild time. Lots of lunches, lots of
Mate, that was the last of the Mad Men
advertising
days.
execs.
Because that was just before, I think it was about 92 or thereabouts, where they changed the tax laws and you couldn't do your big, dirty, long lunches anymore. But right up until then, I've heard about these glory days, but I missed out on those.
They could get you into a lot of trouble.
Bloody bet.
And that was in Adelaide, Young and Rubicam, and that great memories there. But I still was driven to keep studying and keep moving north. So
What did that time teach you, though, working in an ad agency and around ad people? What did you learn from that time?
it's a pretty hedonistic industry. The first year I loved it, but there was a lot of sitting down and writing briefs and briefs for the creative guys or briefs for media and coming up with working closely with creative guys in the media departments and a lot of admin, a lot of sitting, a lot of writing, which I enjoyed for a while, but then to me, there was just too much of that side and not enough getting out there and getting involved with the actual making of the commercials. And I love that. Going to
Were there
a
specific
site.
campaigns you remember? Because I'm just trying to think about what the Mitsubishi.
The Mitsubishi Magna.
Because we had the Magna station wagon
Yep.
in the 80s, and
All
would you
of that.
believe I've seen a handful of them popping up on Marketplace, and I've seen a few people modifying them. The 80s Magna wagon looks great, slammed with a nice set of wheels. Would you believe? Never thought I'd see the day.
No, but I could believe it. But I think I'd enjoy an Evolution wagon. I've been watching them. They're because I also bought the first brand new Evolution 7 when they had just come out. I had a brand new Evo and a yellow one. I enjoyed that for a few years. But the wagons, the Evolution wagons.
So you worked on the campaigns of those. Did you get to go out on the commercials? Did you?
We were involved with the locally manufactured vehicles, the Colts, the Magnas, the Sigmas, but we also got involved with the complete built units, the CBU complete built units from Japan, so Pajeros and
Because the Pajero, those were cracking cars. The 80s, and I've seen people starting to realise that as well. I've started to see a few modified ones out and about, because that 1980s Page with the square body shape.
Yeah, they were sold
They're
all over the world. They've been they're pretty reliable vehicles, so they went everywhere, the Pajero, and demand for them was high in many different countries, and yes, Australia was no different.
How were those ad days? They're out shooting the stuff, because I mean
that was great.
That would have been getting shot on film as well. That would have been 35mm film. They would have been big.
Yep, 30-second, 60-second TV commercials.
Big days.
It was a lot of fun.
And fascinating stuff to see, because you've watched everything from the dies being made and parts being pressed and checked and then going through into Adland and seeing then how you sell the sizzle.
Yeah, the final, the full process, that's right. And look, I loved it for a while, but then I just, I could see my brother did a rotary exchange, and he, in 1 year, came back with great Japanese. He learned Japanese in just 12 months. And
Right.
So I had the technical background in engineering, business degree, and had a really interesting, broad sort of work experience base. But another language, I thought, if I could speak Japanese, my brother can do it and he's loved it. If I could speak Japanese, that would just open doors. That would be, to have a second language is a really good skill to have, and not many of my friends, people I knew, I think it's a bit different now, but back 30 years ago, it was, so I just, that was it. I decided somehow I'm going to get myself to Japan and
Figure it out.
and learn Japanese.
Because it was a strong trade partnership at that time
Huge,
as well.
huge
between
trade
Australia
partnership.
and Japan, early 90s, there was huge investment from Japan here
Exactly.
in Australia. And there was a very strong developing partnership. So that is very understandable.
Yeah, I could just see that opportunity there. So I just waited, plucked up the courage to, because your mind works against you. If I do this, I'm going to have to quit working, and I won't have that regular income. And will I be okay? It took me a few months to pluck up the courage to
say, bugger it.
That's it. Here's my resignation. I'm going to do it. And if I knew, and that was the right thing to do. It just took me a while to get the headspace right, because it's a big move.
Huge.
But man, what a great thing that was to do. What a
move. And isn't
I
that
did not
amazing?
make a mistake.
Your brother inspired that.
Yeah, he did.
Wouldn't have picked that.
He did. He was totally dropped into there was no English around him. He went to a high school. It was all Japanese from morning till night. So the learning curve was steep, and he was only 15 and 16. So
Wow.
A great time. You pick things up. Obviously, the younger you are, the easier it is to learn, take on new skills, new languages. So I was 29, which is still, relatively speaking, it's on the younger side.
Absolutely. But to drop yourself into Japan so what are we here? Early, mid-90s?
Correct, early 90s now.
92, 94. I'm trying to
93.
Guess the time. 93.
93.
There you go, because I was trying to do the math on the degree as well.
And back then, Japan wasn't on people's radar.
No way!
I had a few friends, the football season was about to begin, and they wanted me to come out and play, and I said, look, guys, I'm going to Japan, and so I won't play this year. I've got to get ready for this. It's a big move, and they couldn't understand it, but I could. And I had one friend in Japan, and he said, Mike, just come down, we'll help you get set up down in, it was Fukuoka, which I think was the 5th largest trading city with Australia.
At that
time. And so I sent Dave a fax. I spoke to him a couple of times on the phone. I sent him a fax. Back then we had faxes. I'm coming on this date. Could you pick me up at the airport? But unbeknownst to me, the fax machine was out of paper, and the fax never arrived. So I jumped on a plane and
just stood there
and arrived at this airport, and no one showed, and I didn't have phones set up. I didn't have any way of communicating. I had an address, but luckily I'd befriended a nice girl who sat alongside me, and she was going to Japan to work, and her Japanese future employer was there, and we had 10 hours on the flight together and got to know each other well. And she said, "Mark, I'll just ask if you can get a lift with us." And so that was brilliant, and I turned up. It was a Sunday, so the school was closed. David was running a school, English conversation school. But the Japanese salespeople, they work 24/7. They never stop. So the sales team were there on a Sunday. So I turned up and explained who I was. Luckily, their English had enough English to understand I was David's friend. So they called David. He wasn't home. But Angela, his second 2IC, she said, "Get on this train and come to my place. You can stay with me." So that was my
good old-fashioned debacle.
Yeah, it was a bit of a debacle.
But that's a good introduction, isn't it? I mean, that's travel. You go places and then you're like, oh, what do I do now? It's a lot easier now that you can...
It's much easier now.
Sims and translation and things. But for anybody who remembers a Refidex and what it was like travelling then and buying Lonely Planet books and translation things and flipping through those little books and going, oh, God, how do I say this? It's a
Google
very
Translate.
different experience.
Yeah. No, some of the best memories. That whole Japan chapter was a incredible time.
Sounds like a transformative time. So those first couple of weeks there would have been overwhelming. Do you have recollections of that time and just going?
It's euphoria. You're in a new country. It's an amazing country. The food culture, the car culture, the people are very special. Some of the most kindest, most amazing people you meet on a regular basis there. Honest, hardworking, those the first 3 months was like euphoria. You're so excited
because everything's so different. That's the one thing that captures me about Japan is on a global stage, it's almost like an alternate universe. You go there and it is so different to other parts of the world.
It is, and it's on. Back then, it wasn't on people's radar, but now it is. I've got so many friends and people I know, clients that are regularly going to Japan, but back then it wasn't. And I'm a health freak, so I probably dropped about 5 kgs just from eating Japanese food and eating really clean, healthy, simpler food, and didn't have a lot of money initially, so. Wasn't out drinking at pubs and what have you. So, yeah, it was a healthy experience for me as well.
A very good time. And what did your family think about your move to Japan? Were they supportive? They would understand?
Oh, look, I went there for 2 years to get the language. I knew I wouldn't do it in a year like my brother because I was older and I wasn't at a Japanese high school with just complete... I wasn't fully immersed into the language, so I knew it would take longer. But I didn't know I'd be there for 15 years.
No, and I guess that was what I was wondering. If your folks went, "Oh, that's good on you, Mark. Well, we'll see you when you get back."
See you in a year or two was Mum, but after a few years, Mum stopped asking when you're coming home because she could see they could see, and they started visiting me.
Oh wow!
And Mum and Dad had some of their best holidays I think ever were in Japan, with meeting my friends and me taking them to places that they just blew their minds. My dad was a train guy, so the whole bullet train, the Shinkansen we call it, the bullet train just
would have blown his mind.
Dad and I went to stations just to get on a bullet train to go one station, get off, and then come one station back just for Dad to enjoy the speed and he went to Tokyo back in the 60s, but the bullet train, the whole train scene was very different in the 90s, and he couldn't believe how fast they were and how much they developed. And people just don't understand the speed that those. And if there's an express coming through a station and you're waiting for a local bullet train, but a high-speed express bullet train is coming through, you've got to be well back from the platform. Dad was trying to get a photograph of this train coming through. He didn't realise there was an express, and he'd stood there trying to get a photograph that came through like that, and his hat just lost the hat. The hat just went 60 metres. It completely lost the hat. We couldn't find the hat. It went so far.
Because that air pressure when they come through, that pulse and just the of...
Oh, it does. He almost fell over.
Whoops.
But he didn't. And it was, they have great memories of Japan.
And what was your first job? Like, how did you get started? What did you have to do to get some money coming in?
Oh, David introduced me, my only friend in Japan, David introduced me to, there was a International Masters Academy was the name of the company. It's American based. They had about 20 schools throughout Japan, and one of the schools were looking for a semi full-time teacher. So David and I jumped on the bullet train and went there. David introduced me to the manager. He was a manager. Introduced me to the manager at Kyushu, and John, an American guy, lovely guy. And I got the job and just started teaching 25 hours a week.
And what were you teaching?
English conversation. The Japanese, they study English is compulsory, and they read it and write it really well, but they lack the confidence to speak it. And younger Japanese is a bit different, but the older Japanese really struggle with holding a conversation. So we set up fun classrooms to find ways to get them. We had levels 1 through to 5. 5 could speak quite good English, and level 1s basically couldn't speak much at all. So as my Japanese improved, it made it really easier for me to explain what we're about to do, and then lead into the English, but they would have a good understanding from my... So, look, it's a great job. That was fun. I did that for a few years. I went from semi-full-time to full-time teacher, and then I became the manager. And I was making really good money. And saving it too. So it was all that was good. But the primary purpose was Japanese, and after a few years, I spoke reasonably good Japanese, and I could have come back to Australia and achieved my goal, but I just saw this niche, this opportunity. Had the technical mechanical Mitsubishi automotive business degree, now Japanese. I could just see myself finding vehicles for people back in Australia.
Because how did that start? Did somebody reach out and say, "Hey, Mark, have you seen any of these?" Or was there a moment that you recall?
Yeah, look, it was. I think I drove that all largely myself. I could see, I had a picture. I could see an opportunity there, and so then I started reaching out to. I was just telephoning. I was sending, once again, faxes. I was sending faxes to car dealers and people back in Australia, explaining who I was and what I was prepared to do for them, and are they interested in importing any vehicles? I've got everything in place now, and I became an auction member. I became a USS auction member, and it took a while to get all that set up.
I could imagine. And did you find any of the gaijin, and again, excuse my pronunciation, where as an outsider, and again in the 90s, as an outsider trying to knock on the door and come into these things, did you find
you have to have
some resistance?
References? You have to have Japanese people who are prepared to be your guarantor. So USS membership was quite easy because my wife, I got married in 96, and Yuki's father was happy to be a guarantor. So that gave me access to all the auction sites around. Initially, Yuki would help me out, but once my Japanese got to a good level and I was all set up, I just became a one-man show. And it was, it just went from strength to strength. And it was, interestingly, it was a bit of an omen, or for the want of a better word, a bit of a sign. A lot of people in my situation who did that didn't have the Japanese, and they would work with a lot of Japanese, and they would team up. And I'd see New Zealanders, Americans, Canadians, Irish. I'd see a lot of people there, but they all had a Japanese counterpart, and they would deal with the Japanese in the auctions, and the American, Canadian, whatever would be speaking to the client back in Canada or Ireland, but I just did the whole show myself, which is hugely advantageous for me. It meant I would make more money. I wasn't not splitting fees, and it just made a lot of sense. All because I took the effort to learn Japanese. I was so determined. I did a homestay. I actually lived with a Japanese family. I thought, how can I accelerate my Japanese? So I went and lived with the Japanese family for 3 months. A student said her parents would be very happy for me to go and live with them for 3 months. They liked me a lot, and that 3 months turned into 2 years. So that doesn't happen every day of the week.
No.
So my Japanese just did that.
Would have been exponential. Being exposed to it every day in that familial manner where
they couldn't speak a word of English. So
you had to figure it out real quick if you wanted
Yeah.
anything to happen or...
Yeah, no, it was a smart move, and
Wow.
made a big difference.
Because there's a side story here that we're missing, because you said you moved over in 93 and then you married in 96. So I'm assuming...
So I was there for 3 years before.
At some point there, you crossed paths with your now wife, which probably also helped encourage staying in Japan, if you...
Yeah, it wasn't a huge... This business, when we got married, I was working 7 days a week. At one stage, I was putting 25 cars on a boat myself every month. So that's what kept... Business was really good. The first vehicle I ever exported to Australia was a brand new Toyota Harrier. Most people who go there and started to do what I was doing and started on the ground at auctions and buying, and they were buying a 10-year-old Sylvia. It was interesting that my first car ever was brand new from a dealership. I had a wealthy Sydney-based client, Rush Cutters Bay. Peter had owned service stations. He had some Shell service stations, and he was on the side, loved his cars. So, and he thought the Harrier, which was branded a Lexus here.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the Harrier? Because I'm racking my reasonably extensive
sold
automotive
here
knowledge.
In Australia with the Lexus, but this was before this model, so he wanted to get it early.
Was this like the LS400? Was this like the first?
No, this is the RX.
Door?
I think
the
it was
RX,
the
so
SUV.
the four-wheel drive.
Four-wheel drive. And so I sent him a brand new one, and he loved that. And then I just sent him a lot of vehicles. Once I send a client a car, they see how good the cars are. Generally, I get future orders, repeat orders. But it was just interesting to start with the Harrier.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah, there was some few firsts, which is always exciting when you had the chance to get the first 35 GTR, and the first MGR V8s were being sold in Japan, and I sent the first RV8 to Australia. There were some really cool cars that I got involved with because I was on the ground, and I could just see these.
Well, that's it. You knew people, you had the networks, you spoke the language. You had such a significant advantage over your competitors with your capabilities.
Yeah, I suppose I did in a lot of ways. And Yuki didn't have children at that stage, so I could just work 7 days. I think once I got married, Yuki put a foot down and I couldn't work on Sundays anymore, so I was working 6 days a week. To go to the auctions, and it's the only job I've ever had where you actually experience adrenaline on a regular basis. If a special car comes through and I can see there's Americans, there's other Australians, there's other people who've all gone in to inspect the car pre-auction, and then it's a rare low kilometre really special car. When the car comes through and you're about to start bidding, it's amazing.
It's electric.
It is, yeah, adrenaline. It was when you get the car, very disappointing when you don't get it, but when you get it, it's
victory.
Absolute fabulous experience. And not many jobs where you get adrenaline rushes on a regular basis.
And you're buying things that cool.
Yeah, really special, rare, unique cars. It does become a bit of a monster in a way because it just drags you more and more into it, and there's no turning back.
There's no way out, but I think you've accepted it as well, as I have probably more recently. I've just gone, this is me, this is my life. I might as well just lean into it.
Yeah, I'm still doing it, really, so...
Well, that's it, and you've been doing this since, early, mid-90s.
Yeah.
And you're still doing it now because it's special. Like, this isn't something that a lot of people get to do, and certainly not something that a lot of people would build a career out of. and you get to see and do very special things that, as an automotive enthusiast, you're like, I can't believe I get to see, do, own, drive. Like, it's just special.
Yeah, it's a passion. It's you're lucky if your job can become something that you're passionate about, and that just fortunately for me, that's what happened. So I'll just with such, obviously with competition now from the US, huge competition and a stronger American dollar, it's hard at work to get some of these special vehicles, but you still do have victories, you still do get great cars, but it's more work for sure.
It would be. And with that time living in Japan, because I mean really we're sort of only up to the mid-90s in your story here, and there's all these extraordinary cars being built. What was that like? Did you have a lot of customers that were sort of going, can I get access to these?
Oh yeah.
All of these things, all of these high performance, because this was an amazing time. And again, I think back to Top Secret testing their Le Mans car on the freeways at 3 o'clock in the morning, and all these sorts of things. I mean, you were around for all that.
Well, I went to Top Secret. I met some of the really cool people in Japan, and because I could speak Japanese, I can't think of his surname at the moment, but the boss of Top Secret, I met him, and he took a liking to me, and I met him several times on Tokyo runs when I would go to Tokyo to buy cars. The next day, I'd usually go to Nagoya the next day and buy there, but I think I would go a day earlier sometimes, go to some really cool tuning shops, meet these people, and I built a relationship with Top Secret, and I was able to buy a heavily modified, genuine Top Secret 33 GTR that for a UK client who wanted a very fast. He wanted to take out. He wanted the fastest GTR in the world at the time. I sent it. He developed it further, and he was pulling the best times. Period. And at one stage, they had the fastest GTR in anywhere. That was a Top Secret car.
Wow.
And so I mean, there's so many stories.
Well, this is what I'm here for, mate. And I didn't realise that. So you were going to all the different tuning houses and making friends there as well. So it wasn't just
look, not all of them, but the more interesting ones and the better known ones.
Which ones really stood out to you that you sort of spent time with that you're comfortable to share?
Sakamoto-san, this was on Kyushu, closer to home. He was a GDR specialist in 32, 33s, 34s. He had a very fast 34 GTR. He had a very fast 33 GTR, and so I got to spend time with him. Garage, I can't think of. In fact, the guys from HPI, High Performance Import, the magazine, the editor and the photographer came to Japan to run around with me, and I'd find them cars. They'd do the editorial, take photographs, and I took them to Global to meet Sakamoto, and Theo, the photographer, had his own GTR, and he got a chance to go for a drive with Sakamoto in this heavily modified 33 GTR on the roads, and there was a very quiet road a few k's away, and we got some great footage of that, Theo loved that. I remember buying a heavily modified 30, it was a 1,000 horsepower 32 GTR, sent that to Guam. A lot of US military, Guam is the base, is a US base, and these guys heard about me, so I had constant orders from the Air Force guys there was an old runway in Guam that they used as their local drag strip. So I was sending 1,000 horsepower GDRs to Guam, and these guys just thought, they loved it, and so yeah, I don't know where to start or stop. There's so many.
Christmases come at once, mate. I want to hear all of them. I want to hear any of the special ones. Because did you get to go and do any of these 2:00 in the morning runs? And again,
Prime Garage
names, but
Prime Garage was once again on Kyushu, and we'd go up to the hills in the early hours of the morning where they would do all the drifting, and occasionally we'd have to cut it short because the police would turn up, so we'd all just disperse. And I remember seeing, and I was watching. I had a few clients. In fact, I think I had Martin and Theo with me this time, and cars just everywhere, and rubber, just the smell of rubber everywhere, and just smoke everywhere. And then the police would quickly appear out of nowhere, and bang, everyone would just head off in different directions. And one car took off, assuming the guy in front was going to take off, but he didn't, so he just clipped the back of that car. The bumper bar fell off, or part of the bar, something fell off. He just quickly pulled over, grabbed it, door open as he's rolling past, grabbed it, pulled it in, and then they would just took off. We got a...
Wow. So you were there for real wild times. Because, these were certainly from the folklore that I understand. That was the origins of drifting in Japan, was these... the sort of...
I think it had been going for a little while.
Your touge going up, and I've now gone and driven those roads more recently and gone, wow, these are very special. I can see how they sort of went, well, hang on a sec.
Well, Japan, it's not what you know, it's even more so who you know. If you've got the connection, that's why you need the guarantor. If you want to get real, if you want to rent a property, if you want to become a member at USS, you have to have that connection. I wanted to do, I did triathlons for a while. I wanted to do judo. I did judo in Australia, and I wanted to keep going with the judo. And the only way to do judo with the police was through an introduction, through a connection. And I had a Spanish friend who was an interpreter and a translator for the police, and he did judo with the Kyushu police force, and he asked Tatish-san, 5th Dan black belt, if I could join, and there's no and I did. He said yes, he can join, but there's no way I could have done that without that connection. And Thomas had been working with and helping Tatish-san with Spanish people who were doing the wrong thing for years, so there was a good connection, a strong connection there. So, yeah, some of the toughest times I ever had was on a tatami mat with sparring with Japanese police who had been doing judo for a lot longer than I had. Some just blisters on your hands, and you would just sweat. Middle of summer, Japanese summers are very hot and humid, and so you're wearing the judo gi, and you were just, if you weren't mindful of hydration, you could easily get very dehydrated. And but yeah, great. It wasn't just cars; it was also triathlons, and that's where I met my wife through triathlons. She was a bit of a fitness freak. She competed, and we met doing a triathlon. And probably the most interesting, the most bizarre experience I had was through Prime Garage, which is a well-regarded tuning shop on Kyushu. I got to meet one of his clients who was a Yakuza, and he had a very heavily modified Supra with full TRD. It wasn't a genuine TRD, but it had huge top-mount turbo and full internals. It was a very fast car, and he would come to Prime Garage. I got to meet him, and he invited me because Yakuza and just Japanese in general, if you can speak Japanese, they find that really, that's a good thing. And they think, okay, if this person's made the effort to learn Japanese, then they can communicate with you, and invitations start coming in. It opens massive doors. And this person whose father was old school Yakuza, he was younger Yakuza, invited me to go spend the day at their cockfighting. They had illegal cockfighting set up. The police, no one knew where it was, but I was lucky enough to be invited with Tetsu, the boss of Prime Garage. The two of us went with, I can't think of his name now. We went through these back streets and out to the hills and very remote region through this gate and then down that. And finally we got to this small location where there was just pens everywhere and there was hundreds and hundreds of roosters that were being raised purely for the purpose of cockfighting, and they had a special small room set up with the pit with seats up on either side, and I got to experience cockfighting in Japan, surrounded by mafia.
Yeah, run by the Yakuza, and you just
run by the Yakuza, and it was.
That's surreal.
That takes that would have to be the most interesting thing.
You'd certainly would have just kept your head down that day, and probably not the day for jokes and banter. Is that a speak when spoken to, or what's the general?
Be respectful. Definitely be respectful, which I always was. Which is why I got invited to these sorts of places. If you're respectful and polite, and you say, "Domo arigatou gozaimashita," if you speak with polite Japanese and you say thank you, if you could just say thank you, that's a huge step in the right direction in terms of getting on well with Japanese people. So I just, was respectful and did that, and it opened this amazing door.
You went all the way down the Japanese rabbit hole, didn't you? That's unbelievable. I can't believe you're up like drifting in the mountains and all these sorts of things. This is wild, mate. Now, you also mentioned, and I think it's a lovely segue, the guys from HPI, because you ended up being reasonably involved in what was a very big time for automotive magazines as the sort of connections were made between Australia and Japan and sharing, because there was an enormous appetite here in Australia for what was going on in Japan, and you became one of the conduits.
Yeah, there was huge thirst for these special cars and these performance vehicles, and HPI was a way for many Australians to get to see what's going on. And they had multiple trips. HPI came to Kokura, to Kyushu, I think 2 or maybe 3 times, and we travelled around Japan together, and we did Fuji Speedway. We did some big events together, and I just introduced them to all these people and cars, and we. I remember when I bought that brand new Evolution 7, and I had a client. Once again, Prime Garage had a client who had a heavily modified Evo 7. And so we did a feature using my brand new car and some heavily modified car, stock versus heavily modified. We did down at the port. Down at the port's huge. You've got acres and acres of places to drive these cars fast without any issue. And we did some great editorial. They did great editorial, and Theo was really handy with video and with his camera. Took great shots, and I think I mentioned the other day, I've just bought a car in Japan for a client who used to read about, he was a teenager at school, high school, and he used to read about me in HPI 20 plus years ago, and he just contacted me about 6 months ago now, wanting me to find him a car.
Which I think is so cool.
That was when he told me, look, I remember reading about you in HPI, that was fascinating, because I've mentioned or heard about HPI for quite a few years, and here he was, and I found him a really good Tourer V, Chaser Tourer V, and the cars, he's just taken delivery of the car and he's over the moon. So it's funny how that all worked out.
It is magical. I used to sit and read and read and read because it is hard to remember that that's how we would learn about our interests. Was you go to the newsagent and you'd buy the magazine. And I would buy hot fours, fast fours, because I was really fascinated by, turbocharged, smaller engines, big efficiency.
Yeah.
And I would buy all these magazines and I would just read them cover to cover over and over and over and over again because the internet wasn't what it was. It was much like you really had to hunt for information.
Yeah, that's right. There was, HPI was a lot of fun, and it, not sure when it ceased publication, but it served its purpose well. It was a great magazine.
They were amazing. They were amazing for that, and they would have been so delighted. Because do you recall how HPI and yourself connected? Did they reach out to you, or how did that happen?
I'd exported a car to a client who was good friends with Martin Don, and who was the chief editor for HPI, and he contacted me, and Theo did the camera work, and they said, "Can we come to Japan? Can you organise some cars for us? We'd love to come visit and meet you." And so that's how it started, just a mutual contact, mutual friend. And
because what did you end up doing? Did you end up sort of supplying other information and did you write, or were you just the man on the ground that facilitated such things?
Yeah, I basically introduced them to all the people, the cars. I would line up special vehicles for them to use in the magazines for the editorial, and I think the very first time they came across, they did a full editorial on me and explained my background and what I was doing and my day-to-day runnings, the auctions, and where I was exporting cars to, and did a feature on me. Still kept some of those magazines, but yeah, I was basically giving them all the material they needed for future magazines. And yeah, Martin was very good with the pen, and Theo was very good with the camera. And Kansai HKS, I remember taking them to HKS. They met the boss of HKS on Kyushu, and he had a couple of very special 34 GTRs. And yeah, we were buying a 34 GTR for 2.5 million yen back then. Three and a half for a really good one. So, 40, 50K.
Which again seemed like that might as well have been $1 million back then, which is what's funny comparatively.
It's all relative.
So much money.
It's all relative
for an imported Japanese car.
Yeah, I'm talking a long time ago, so that it would have been. But yeah, compared to these days, it's just funny.
Actually, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like that. Oh wow! So even the HKS cars, because there were some of the '90s HKS cars that were just unbelievable, and the iconic liveries and just things that
Yeah, a lot of
make
special
my heart
livery.
sing.
Yeah, makes a lot of people's hearts sing, I think. Yeah, I need to go back there. I was there recently for a trip to Okinawa, which was great fun, but I need to get back to Tokyo and do the auctions again. It's been I've got great agents on the ground who do all the. I trust them totally, and they know cars really well. So I don't need to be there, but it's always...
You want to be there. That's the thing, isn't it?
Well, you can cover so many more cars. If I'm relying on my agent in Tokyo he can only inspect so many cars. But if I'm there on the ground as well, you can get through twice as much, 3 times as much, because I can sort of walk up to a car and I can make a decision within 30 seconds. Okay, this is not up to scratch. Next, and you just keep moving. Whereas if you getting someone else to be your eyes, and they always spend a bit more time looking at the car and then relay that information back to you, and then you say, no, not good enough, next. So it's definitely more efficient if I'm on the ground myself as well.
A couple of buying trips each year.
Yeah, well, that's what I will. COVID sort of changed things a bit, but I can now, and the kids have now all moved on, so I can start to do some buying trips, which I will.
A few more of those. I think that sounds very good. Because we'll rewind here because we've sort of gone super off track. In terms of your time spent in Japan, so I'm just trying to do the math. So 15 years you spent there. So when did you come back home? We're sort of 08, 09?
09.
09.
It was 09, correct. Yeah, I'd come home at Christmas. I'd come home once or twice a year, but predominantly I was based there for most of the time, and it was 09.
And talk me through the thought process coming back to Australia. How did that sort of unfold?
Oh, look, the kids were at an age where they needed to either... I didn't want them coming back to Australia too late, then they would struggle with making friends and language barrier. So I really the age 10 is the cut-off point, generally speaking. If you talk to people who, that's generally speaking, if you can get the kids back and immersed into Australia and they're 10 or younger, they will
pick it up,
and there'll be no long-term issues or disadvantages. So that's what we did.
Yeah, gotcha.
That was the main reason.
And was that something you'd always discussed? You'd sort of said, look, we'd like the kids to be able to obviously speak fluent Japanese, but then also experience life in Australia.
Yeah, we had that loose plan. The father-in-law was a good man, a hard-working engineer, worked for Nippon Steel for all his life, but he was pretty full on, and when the kids started to get to the schooling age, he started to become more involved with... The intentions were good, but he would often overstep the mark, and I would sometimes I'd sit down and just talk to him and say, look, I'm the father, you're the grandfather, let's just keep it that way. But he was pushed hard from an academic perspective. He really became quite pushy, and eventually made the decision easy to. It just caused stress and problems between my wife and I and what have you. So I just made the decision in the end. Look,
probably best.
This is it. I need to draw a line in the sand here. It's now definitely time for us to make that move.
Because that is a societal expectation, though, and that is something I've noticed in culturally in Japan, is there is immense pressure on their young people to succeed academically because they understand that education is obviously the basis of, building a successful life as such. But there is enormous pressure on the kids.
There is. It's too much, and I tried to manage that as best I could. But it's a hard thing to manage when you've got a wife and a father-in-law opposing what I had a balanced. I just want to keep it balanced, happy, moderate, without getting excessive. But when they call juku, which is a cram school. When the cram school started, it just started to get a bit crazy, and I wasn't happy.
Did you see the stress on the kids as well? Did you see that? Because I've wondered about this.
Definitely, you can.
As I've spent longer in Japan,
yeah,
and went to more remote places and tried to understand the people and the culture a little bit better.
Yeah,
and I guess the societal constructs that they operate under. I really did see how deep those expectations are on each generation, and that you do not speak back to your superiors, you do not, there is very much a very strong hierarchy, very
vertical,
very vertical.
Senpai, kohai It's, the mentor, the teacher, student, blah, blah, blah. It's a huge part of their culture. But when it's directly affecting my children, that's when it gets. Yeah. That's when I thought, okay, enough's enough. We're gonna go back to Australia now, and English is going to be more important for the children anyway, long term. If you had to make a choice to speak good English or good Japanese, English is much more widely
in a few more places.
Interesting, Sophie has gone back to. They both English is their stronger first language. They both kept their Japanese to a degree. Sasha more so. Sophia, the younger one, let it sort of slide a fair bit, but she's gone back to Japan, spent time with her grandparents, and
amazing.
Her Japanese is once again it's always there.
It would have unlocked.
It's just
come
back to the forefront
because that would have been their first language.
It was,
yeah. So they spoke Japanese as
up till 10
babies. That was correct. What they were hearing at home, and wow,
yeah. So it's all worked out really well, but I just had to make that decision.
Yeah, and how was that transition? Because had she been to Australia a couple of times?
Yeah, just for short holidays. But yeah, that was a challenge for her because my Japanese was pretty good, so we would use Japanese most of the time, and she didn't really need a great deal of English, so she had to really switch to the English mode, and so yeah, she had her challenges, frustrations in the early days, and she was desperate. She really wanted to work for Qantas Jetstar, initially Jetstar, as to do her apprenticeship, so to speak, and she's now full-time, long-haul, first-class, business class with Qantas. But to get into Jetstar, initially English was obviously important, and it took her a while to get there, but she got there in the end because she's pretty tenacious.
Far out. So that would have been very difficult. So she moved here, and did she have a network of friends? Were there people that she knew?
Not really.
But I'm almost hearing this.
My family.
This sounds like history repeating here. With there's and the wife's going, hang on a sec. Oh God, we've got to figure this out, and it's quite extraordinary. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. I mean, probably some of the most exciting, fun times in my life was when I was living in Japan, and it was never a problem for me. Not frustration just with the language, but I make friends easily. It was never a problem for me, but it was more challenging for Yuki when the shoe was on the other foot and it was reversed. Initially for her in Australia was hard work.
I could only imagine. Yeah, because everything is so different here, and it's probably not as well geared up for someone who speaks Japanese as a first language to rock around in Australia, where not a great deal of us that are fluent in second languages, and even less likely that it would be Japanese.
That's right, and you find out that there's actually quite significant Japanese communities here on it. So Yuki found a way to these communities, and they helped each other out, and so it was all okay, but it was a lot of hard work, and initially, challenging for sure. And doing the right thing as a husband, you've got to be there to give that support, and so yeah, I had a few challenges.
Oh, mate, you certainly have worked at doing life on hard mode. You certainly haven't taken the easy path each time.
I've set myself a few challenges there along the way.
You've set yourself a few challenges, mate. You've made that complex.
Worthwhile challenges and very rewarding in the end.
But it probably strikes me as to, you come across, you're a man with great humility. I've known you, as I said, for over a decade. I didn't know most of these stories. I didn't realise you had a mechanical engineering background. I didn't realise, all these things. the only reason I knew you were fluent in Japanese was when I first met you. I remember your MacBook had Japanese characters on the keys.
On the keys, yeah.
And I recall noting that and going, bloody hell, his Japanese must be pretty damn good if that's his preferred keyboard.
Yeah, it was. My spoken and comprehension and speaking ability is definitely better than my written ability. And you don't, for me, need to be able to converse. Meet someone, talk to them, understand what they're saying, and buy that car. So, writing, reading, not so critical. I can read all the basics, hiragana, katakana. I can read all that, and I've been reading auction reports for decades. So, I can. I've got a good enough ability to read all the important stuff, but speaking and comprehension are the big ones. So, that old homestay where I just chucked myself in the deep end, that was the best, probably one of the smartest things I could do at the time. And I remember meeting up with friends, and they could see, just in weeks, they could see, wow, Mark, your Japanese is getting better. What have you been doing? I've been doing a homestay. And that was key for me. And 3 months turned into 2 years.
and that's what. Explain a little bit more of that to me. How did that family? How did that even happen? How did that happen? Where they just went?
I spoke to students. I was teaching at the school. I was managing. I can't remember if I was manager yet, but I was head teacher, I think. And I just had this idea. I thought, well, I might just ask my students if they know of anywhere or anyone that would be happy to have me pay board and live with them and do a homestay. And it's just an idea came to me one day. And one student, she said, yep, I'll speak to my parents and see what they say. And the next day she came back to the next class and she said, yeah, my parents, they want to meet you and they'd be happy to do a homestay. So that's how it started.
It is a really extraordinary story, Mark.
Thank you. It was nice to be able to share it.
But it's just amazing that these different things that you have done over the years, and the way that I guess you've just thrown yourself into it as well. You haven't done any of these things by half, have you?
No, I just knew that if I moved there, although it was hard, as I said earlier, to make that decision to quit the job and then not have that pay packet every month or every week, whatever it was, that held me back for a while. But once I made that decision, I just plucked up the confidence I thought about it, spoke to people, and I just got to a point where I just did it and no turning back. Got there, and it was the best thing I ever did.
And are there a couple of cars that really stand out to you over the years as you've been asked to find things and track down certain cars? Are there any stories that really stand out?
The Renault I found, I remember at USS Tokyo there was a gorgeous black grade 4 Renault 5 Turbo 2 left-hand drive, of course, they're all left-hand drive. In fact, I was with you and Tim at your office that day, and I spoke to Nakajima and I gave him he inspected it for me, and I tried to buy it and I was the underbidder. I just missed out, and I was really annoyed because that was a low-K factory black grade 4 car in really good condition, and I think it sold for about 7 million yen. That night I went home and I started searching. I searched all around Japan. I started looking, because I hadn't really been looking for it. Didn't have a client who wanted a Renault 5 Turbo 2 at the time. I just saw it at the auction and spent all night, and I found a red one, which you've seen. You saw that red one. I found a red one in Osaka, and I called my agent first thing in the morning and said, I don't know what you're doing today, but I do now. You're going to get on a train and go. Here's the dealership. Please get there as soon as you can and I want to get this car inspected. And it was a good car. I bought it, and I brought that to Brisbane and used that for a while for publicity, PR. It was a great car, great marketing exercise, and had a lot of fun along the way. Had that for about a year, and then ended up exporting that to Belgium. And that was a fun car. I remember driving around Brisbane and people were almost having car accidents as this Renault 5 Turbo 2.
For people who might not be familiar with that car and might not, do you want to explain that car?
Oh, it's basically an almost iconic cult car that some people would be aware of the Group B racing, and until it was banned because just too many drivers were getting killed. The Group B, the Renault 1, it was the Renault 5 Turbo, and it was such a fast car, such an iconic car that the French public put so much pressure on Renault and so many people started requesting they do a production run again, because many were destroyed. Production numbers were low, so they put pressure on Renault to do a rerun, and that was the Turbo 2, Renault 5 Turbo 2, mainly for road use. And they produced, I don't know total numbers, but they produced thousands due to demand, and only left-hand drive. I remember someone had one for sale in Australia and had been converted from left to right, which is always a mistake, but from the factory, all left-hand drive. And just very huge blown guards and very, very deep, very beautiful deep dish factory mags were built for them, and mid-engine, so the engine rear-wheel drive with the engine right behind the driver. So mid-mounted, turbocharged, big boxy guys. They were bound to be successful, and with Group B racing success, it was just that's probably the best car, most interesting and most fun, cool car I bought in the last 30 years. But the NSX, I've had 32, 33, 34 GTRs, Tommy Mackinnons. I've experienced them all, but that Renault 5 Turbo 2
That's the one.
That was probably the one.
You have to get another one now. What are they worth now? That'd be scary money, wouldn't they?
I inspected one in Queensland for a client about 3 years ago. That sold for 130, 135, but I think they'd be fetching 150 to 200 now. For a good example.
They'd be pushing up. You'll appreciate this. I snuck into a car park that I wasn't supposed to be in when I was in Monaco, and car parks in Monaco are a good place to see obscure things, and I actually found two of those. So I found the earlier generation and then one of the newer ones side by side, just covered in dust, with the mid-mount engines. I've got photos of them somewhere, actually. And again, I just couldn't believe it. Like, to see two of them just chilling in a car park there, right next to the harbour.
Yeah.
They're astonishing cars. They've got such a presence.
Very unique. I think, they're a beautiful car. 2 seats and light, very light, and when modified, breathtakingly fast. But sadly, too many drivers lost their lives during that amazing Group B.
Wild times.
Wild times.
And tell me a little bit about your NSX journey, because obviously they're a gorgeous car, and you found yourself...
and you drive one regularly too.
No, mate, I don't know anything about that. Maybe time to time. But tell me about your journey into the NSX.
Oh, look, Japanese generally consider the NSX was the first of the Japanese supercar. it was the Japanese supercar, and Santa was involved with design in some way, shape or form. I'm not sure on specifics, but he was involved, and and they're just such a beautiful looking car. Aluminium panels, rear mounted engine. It just bound to be successful, which they certainly were. And I got a chance to buy a 30,000 kilometre grade 4.5 a car many years ago. When I was living in Japan. We could do personal import, so you could own a car for a year and then bring it back to Australia. So I owned this NSX for a year, drove it on weekends, and special car. 30 k's it done. It was still had plastic on the sill, the door, the driver's door, and the passenger, the sill panel there where the kick pad where you step in and out of the car. You've got that section, and it still had the factory plastic on. It'd been really well looked after, and I got to know a good Honda workshop in Kokura, and they just serviced it and maintained it for me. It was special.
Because when you get under those cars, and I know as a man with mechanical engineering background, I mean, the suspension components, the way that they're built, the way that they're designed, not sure if you have those burned into your brain the way that I do, but when you actually look at it and the flat underbody, the pure science and technology that went into that car, because the aim was to show the Italians, the Europeans, that if we wanted to build a mid-mount supercar, we'd be able to beat you at your own game.
Here it is, yeah, with the reliability as well.
Correct. A car that you can drive down the road to get a bottle of milk, or you could drive it onto the racetrack and go full noise.
Love that video of Senna jumping in one.
Mate, in the loafers.
In the loafers, heel to toe, smoking, taking off with in front of all the cameras, burning rubber for about 10 metres. That was
magical.
Priceless.
Magical.
Yeah.
I'm so glad a camera was rolling at that moment, because I did see that was a Japanese camera crew that mic'd him up and just had the idea of just putting that on him and filming him doing that, because otherwise that wouldn't have been captured.
Wow. Yeah, some of those spontaneous acts are the best, aren't they?
And the other one was the filming of the feet, putting a camera in to film the feet. That wasn't normal. And the fact that footage exists was because this Japanese camera crew went, that seems like a good idea, let's do that. And this iconic footage of this iconic man driving that car like
iconic car
stolen, because it was my understanding that his involvement in that vehicle was the testing, so the actual the feel of the car, because they are a car, well, I've certainly found it to be a car that rewards you if you can drive it well, and if you can't drive it well, not dissimilar to probably what you'd remember with your Alfa Romeo, that if you hit it right, and if you balance your throttle, if you can heel toe it properly, if you can do everything well, the car rewards you with a symphony. Whereas if you miss, then the car will go, and it goes, you're an idiot, why are you driving me?
Yes. Luigi the mechanic, very famous South Australian Ferrari Alfa Romeo mechanic who was the best mechanic in Adelaide. Remember getting him to service my 105, and he fixed a few things for me and serviced. He said, "Mark, come for a drive. It drives much better now." And he drove, and he was heel to toe around Victoria Square, driving. Wasn't really sparing the horses. He was pushing it quite hard. And I was just watching his footwork, and it was fantastic. The guy was not only one of the best mechanics, Ferrari, Alfa, Fiat mechanics in South Australia, if not Australia, he could also drive. And he smoked a packet of Marlboro every day. Marlboro Red every day. Luigi. Amazing man.
What a man. Did you find that your original Alfa, because I've got to go right off track here, What was your experience like of owning a 105? I think that they're a beautiful car, and you couldn't give those away not too long ago, but they've found their place in the collector's market now too. What was your experience like with that?
It was my second car, so very fortunate to, and I had a lot of driving to do, out to Mitsubishi, then the Institute, Uni SA at the levels, and Regency Park to do TAFE, part of the trade, fitter and turner trade, the technical side, the theory side. So I was doing hundreds of kilometres every week in this Alpha, and it was a fabulous, light car, easy to drive, well balanced, good brakes. You know, I used to push that car pretty hard, and I used to drive it from Adelaide to Victor Harbour, which is 70 odd kilometres. And you know, back then, radars were just infrequent, and you didn't really. We'd take back roads, and you know, you'd be sitting on 90 mile an hour, and it just felt stable, and it was, yeah, probably the most fun I've ever had in a car. Was possibly the formative early years in that Alfa Romeo.
Because they're beautiful. They're a beautiful body shape, and if I recall correctly,
stunning looking.
They had the 2-litre 4-cylinder. Is that what yours had?
Correct.
Yeah, and then manual gearbox,
5-speed,
and they were so front engine, rear drive. So they did all the things that Alfa actually does very well.
Yeah, I used to hang that quite light in the rear, and it's without too much persuasion, you could get the back end just to
go see you later.
Be all over the place. It was fun. It got a lot of fun to drive on dirt country roads.
Yeah,
you could just drive sideways for
just hold it.
Yeah,
because they were light and quick, and they revved, and they loved being revved, like sort of 7,000
super
RPM,
responsive,
red line, and you just sort of hold them there, and they just couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah, corrosion obviously was the only issue, was
significant.
The rust
corrosion.
factor.
Can't remember if I told you my first car was an Alfa. If I shared that with you, I had a 33 Cloverleaf 1.7.
Right.
So horizontally opposed 4-cylinder, so it had the Alpha Boxer, and then the downdraft Webers, and that car, you know, I owned that for 12 years, and I modified everything, did everything, just pulled it apart, put it together again. But there was a magic to those cars, that just the noise, the feeling, the way they rewarded you for driving them well, and sort of slapped you for
absolute driver's car.
Driver's
car, yeah.
Yeah, there's something about. I know
Great
Jeremy
memories.
Clarkson goes on about, you know, you're not a real enthusiast until you've owned an Alfa Romeo, and I firmly stand by that, because you also don't know pain until you've owned an Alfa Romeo. I always laugh that I never got better value out of my RACQ membership, because, mate, that bloody thing would be on a tilt tray.
Yeah,
Just
regularly.
a little bit too much.
Oh, very good.
Oh, well, mate, too many good things. Well, look, I could probably bang on with you for a while, but I'm going to help you go and pick up a car. So we're going to go from here to go and do the thing that we love the most, because you've got a nice special car that's turned up.
Yeah, Porsche Boxster Spider.
Yeah, actually, you posted that on Facebook today, so that's not a state secret. You
Posted
can see
it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, a day or two ago.
I spotted it and I saw it. I was like, Boxster, what are you posting? Who cares about a. And then I saw the back and I'm like, whoa, no, that's a special one.
Yeah, thank you for your help to pick it up. Yeah, it's I put it on the truck in Adelaide, and I'm going to pick it up here in Pinkenba.
Boom.
Seaver. No, I appreciate your help. Thank you. And thank you for today.
Oh, Mark, this has been the best. I just can't believe all the things. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, on your podcast, we'll get, you know, this is ideal. This kind of, it brings out all this information, because this is what a podcast does. You've got the time to talk about things. The things I haven't mentioned for years, I've touched on today.
And that's the joy of this format. It's actually why I've really fallen in love with it, because we live in a world that continues to accelerate. And this, you know, I push record, you put your headphones on, and the rest of the world disappears. and, we engage in lengthy, deep conversation, which is...
Yeah, well, I hope people found it interesting. Well done. Thank you very much.
Well, Mark, for people who would like to follow your antics, because, you are a prolific sharer on the internet of all the wonderful things you buy, sell, look at, where can people follow what you do?
Mark Hocking Special Vehicles. And, I've got thousands of followers now, and I enjoy it, and I feel obliged to keep the content up and the photography, good photos up there, and I get, people appreciate it, enjoy it, so I'll keep doing it.
We love the stories, Mark. That's what it's all about. Well, mate, thank you for taking this time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
For the people that have made it all the way to the end of another long, meandering, all read everything podcast, thanks for joining us. Be kind to yourselves, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Scott.